Technology is changing faster than most of us can keep up with. And somewhere between the headlines, the hype, and the fear, there are real conversations worth having. I'm Melissa Giuliano, and this is AMG Cyberspace, a space where we can unpack the stories shaping tech, AI, and cybersecurity. Hi everyone, thank you for joining me in today's video. In today's video, I'm going to talk about the recent cyber attack in early to mid-May that affected Instructure, which is the company sitting behind Canvas. Canvas being a learning management system used by the largest high schools and universities across the globe. So they do have quite a significant presence within Australia. They've got RMIT, Uni Melbourne, Uni Canberra, quite a few different universities across Australia, but globally as well, they have a massive reach. They've got the large prestigious institutions such as Stanford, Harvard. So yeah, Canvas is used by over 30 million people at over 8,000 different institutions worldwide. And on the 7th of May this year, students, when logging into Canvas, couldn't log in. They were met with instead a page which showed a ransom message from a hacking group, which essentially said that Instructure had previously known that they had been breached. They decided to apply a security patch, thought the issue was resolved, and now they've got a deadline till the 12th of May to either pay the ransom that ShinyHunters have asked for, or the student data that has been stolen behind the scenes will get leaked. So clearly not what you're wanting to ever log into when you're accessing your learning management system, especially as this happened during finals times for American unis, and then for Australian universities this would have been during mid-semester exams. So timing was horrible. This is when students are going up for their assignments. People straight away were posting on like Reddit, Instagram. I definitely saw it all over my social media. That's how it was brought to my attention, that people who were trying to do their last minute exam cramming and studying couldn't anymore because they could not access their learning management system. So I guess to draw a comparison to how important these learning management systems are for units, they're where you submit your assignments, they're where you see your tutorials, see your upcoming work, revise on previous work and lessons plans. They're essentially the equivalent of the Microsoft or Google suite for those who work in a corporate environment. So I know if my Microsoft was taken down for a day, that renders me basically useless. I've got my Teams, I've got my Outlook, and everything affiliated with my Microsoft account. It is the exact same for Canvas for students. This is their entire school base, their entire school life sits on this platform. So to not have access to it before exams is very, very stressful. This incident actually marks the largest cyber breach in the educational space, as ShinyHunters have claimed to have 275 million records across 8,809 different institutions. So I guess the question I pose, who is ShinyHunters? Where did they come from? What's their background, I guess? So they're a cybercrime organization. They've been active around 2020, so for 6 years now. They're what we call a decentralized cybercrime unit. So it's not a formalized structure with a head of and different teams, different people with a hierarchy, which it's really weird to think about cyber criminals, gangs in that way. It feels like something on TV or not something that we're dealing with day to day, but that is the reality of it. And they're very decentralized. So members are part of different cyber crime units. Some of them have been arrested, but it makes it really hard that because there is no formalized structure, hierarchy, and these cyber criminals are flowing across multiple different groups, it makes it really hard to trace back the origins of their group. But since 2020, when they've been active, they're becoming more and more sophisticated and more high profile with the attacks. In 2024, they were responsible for a credential stuffing attack against Snowflake customers. So credential stuffing is the security attack where usernames and passwords, so emails and passwords, have been leaked online already. So then the threat actors get that leaked information and try using those same emails with those same passwords across multiple different applications, hoping that people are reusing their passwords against the same email in different applications. So even though the password's been linked for one specific application, they can gain access to multiple different applications. In 2025, they were responsible for AI-generated voice phishing, so we call that vishing, against Salesforce customers. So they pretended to be Salesforce customer service representatives using AI generated voices to do so. Then they would call up Salesforce customers that pretend to be customer support, and they would try to get those customers to click on malicious links or provide information from them. So they were phishing them in that way, similar to those scammy emails you receive that try to get you to click on links or enter sensitive information, but they did that over the phone instead. And then in 2026 as well, this year, they've been quite active. So they actually attacked Rockstar Games, who are the creators of Grand Theft Auto 6, and threatened to leak data about Grand Theft Auto 6. So we almost had a cybercriminal leak Grand Theft Auto 6 before it was released, which is crazy. And then again, with this Instructure attack, they're showing a new level of sophistication in the sense that they've orchestrated a supply chain attack. So a supply chain attack is where instead of targeting each of these individual universities, so as we mentioned, this affects over 8,800 different universities they've said they've stolen the data from. Instead of having to go target each of those universities individually, they've targeted the vendor behind them, Instructure, who owns that architecture. So onto the details of the attack. The attack itself was not that sophisticated. What they did is Instructure, so the company behind Canvas, they have a program called Free for Teacher program, which is a free version of Canvas that is accessible to those in the education space. However, there was no validation for those signing up to the free version to validate that they're actually educated. So anyone could sign up for this free version of Canvas. And what was happening is behind the scenes in the back end, the fully paid version of Canvas, which is used by all these high-paying universities, wasn't physically separated from the free version. It is only logically separated. So when we talk about logical versus physical separation, a physical separation is when there is a separation of the hardware and infrastructure sitting behind it all. So that's separate physical servers running so that there is separation and it's not just a logical divide. If there's a logical divide, there's what we call a trust boundary in between the two networks. And this trust boundary is when you're jumping from privileges to have access from one network, for example, the Free for Teacher network, to the other network, which is, for example, the full paid version of Canvas. And what ShinyHunters were able to do was exploit this vulnerability, and they found a way from the free version to the fully paid version by exploiting the Free for Teachers program. And that's how they were able to jump and break that trust boundary, which led to this cyber attack. There are three notable phases of this attack. The first phase actually began on April 25. So this is 2 weeks before the attack was made public. And Instructure actually knew there was a breach of their network. They were aware of this. They applied a security patch on this, and by April 29th, they had claimed that the issue was resolved, nothing had been stolen, the bad actors were out of their network, and the security patch fixed it all. So this happened 2 weeks before the May 7th event where the login pages were hijacked. The second phase was on May 3rd. ShinyHunters posted on their ransomware.live website, so ransomware.live website being a place where these cyber criminals come, list the companies they're targeting, the data that they have, and post the ransom that they want. They actually posted that they have Instructure's information there for these schools, so they put up this post saying that they have billions of private messages and 275 million records, and that Instructure has until May 6th to make contact with them and pay the ransom. And then the final phase was when it went public, and this was on May 7th, so the day after the May 6th deadline they gave on their ransomware live. is when they hijacked these login pages and students were trying to log into campus to use the platform for their schoolwork and instead met the page which said Instructure now has until May 12th to pay the ransom they've demanded, and even expressed the story that you thought you had kicked us out with your security patch. We told you to make contact with us, you didn't, so this is what's happened. So the whole way ShinyHunters have made this public, the entire journey through their hijacked login page on May 7th. The resolution for this one was actually quite quick. On May 8th, Canvas was fully restored and ShinyHunters informed everyone that they came to a resolution with Instructure. They never said Instructure paid the ransom, but they said they had come to a resolution and that the records had been destroyed. So when we're talking about this cyber breach and the records stolen, that's obviously of key concern, again, because we're dealing with schools and universities here who have a lot of sensitive PII, some hold PCI information, so personally identifiable information, and credit card and financial information as well. So what was confirmed to be stolen includes names, institutional email addresses, student IDs, and Canvas inbox messages. So what was confirmed not to be stolen includes passwords, date of births, government IDs, or financial records, which is good. So that's the really highly sensitive and confidential information that is lucky isn't stolen. What is most concerning out of what was stolen are those inbox messages, because a lot of those inbox messages are between tutors, can be between psychologists at these schools. So what these messages could contain could be academic hardship applications, mental health disclosures, things of that sensitive nature, which, even though they're messages, people don't want exposed to a wider audience. They're meant to be confidential between the person who's sending it to the person who's received it. So that is of a concerning nature. And what's more concerning is that this opens up a new vulnerability for these students. So these students now, whose records were stolen, are likely to be susceptible to spear phishing. So whilst I will note that Instructure did say they destroyed the messages, and we'll get into that part next around can we actually trust that they've destroyed the messages and should Instructure have paid the ransom, or if they even paid the ransom. But why this is still a concern is if that information is out there, these students are susceptible to spear phishing, which is a very targeted form of phishing. I'll come back to this example before where we've all probably received an email which is click this link, log into your details and you'll receive a $25 gift voucher for something, which we know is scammy. None of us do it. Most of us tend to delete it or report it as phishing, which is the correct thing to do, and organizations train you on this because it is a really real vulnerability for your company. What it now means is that these phishing campaigns can be a lot more targeted and personalized. Instead of some generic, hello there, please click the link, it can be, hello Alyssa, this is your student ID number, I know this, this, and this about you because these records have been stolen. So this personalized email can appear to come from their university or their school and be highly targeted towards them, and hence a more likely successful attack, because it's really hard to detect that it's phishing in the first place and that it's not actually the institution sending it. In terms of local universities, so Uni Melbourne had confirmed that student data was involved. RMIT had Canvas down for an indefinite amount of time and didn't know when they'd get it back up. And other universities, including UTS, Griffith, QUT, Adelaide, and USyd, had all reported disruptions as well due to this. So as I mentioned earlier, on May 12th, just hours before the deadline that ShinyHunters gave them, Instructure had published a statement saying that they had reached an agreement with ShinyHunters. ShinyHunters had said they provided the shred logs, which is a digital way to say that they've destroyed the files. But the issue with this is that there is no independent way to verify these shred logs. There is no way to confirm that they're legit and they just haven't been fraudulently created. So at the end of the day, we're kind of just taking their word for it that these records have been deleted, which again, when you're dealing with cyber criminals, probably isn't the best method of confirmation. What's really interesting is that Instructure and ShinyHunters have never used the word ransom. They've just said they have come to an agreement. But based off of the timing of it, being hours before the deadline was hit, the really careful corporate language on their PR statements, and the fact that Instructure was actually removed from ShinyHunters' ransomware live website all do indicate that they have likely paid the ransom. No financial amount has been disclosed, and there's been no actual statement saying a ransom was paid. This is really controversial because cyber security professionals all suggest that you do not pay the ransom. This is because if you're paying the ransom, you're giving incentives for these cybercrimes. It is really just reinforcing the economic model behind being a cyber criminal. If you extort people for this money, people will pay it. So especially Australia itself, our stance on this is quite unambiguous. It is that it is strongly recommended not to pay a ransom. Making a ransomware payment does not guarantee sensitive data will be removed, nor prevent it from being sold or leaked online. You may also be targeted by another attack, and it makes Australia a more attractive target for cybercriminal groups. And this Australia part is quite interesting, as Australia actually was the 7th most targeted country globally for ransomware attacks in 2024. So we actually do have quite a threat landscape for this sort of attack, even though our countrywide, national-wide stance on this is that we should not be paying the ransom, we should not be incentivizing this behavior, and as mentioned before, there is actually no guarantees to say this data has been deleted. And if it's not deleted, who knows what these cyber criminals are actually going to do with it. So to wrap this up, to conclude, Canvas is back online. The deadline has passed. Students have been able to cram and study for their exams. Following this saga on social media has been really interesting, seeing most students having exams being postponed due to the fact that they weren't able to study for them. And this is both within Australia and globally as well. So this has really had a large global impact. If you're an Australian student who's using Canvas, do keep an eye out and be really smart when you're looking at your emails, especially if you're receiving emails from your university, just to ensure that they're not a really sophisticated spear phishing attack. But I guess the big picture of this is that this wasn't a really sophisticated attack. It was just exploiting a product design choice made by Instructure to make their Free for Teachers program have no validation of the people signing up for it, and do have that logical separation of environments with the vulnerability that exposed ShinyHunters to be able to go from Free for Teachers network to the Canvas network. And I guess it's really just a question of not if, but when, especially now that the ransom has been supposedly paid. It means it's more likely that the education sector will become a target for this sort of attack. So hopefully we see some changes and some reforms in the way that this is handled, and ensure that these third-party suppliers are up to the task of protecting student data, so next time it's not something more serious like credit card numbers or government IDs. Thank you so much for listening into this week's episode. I hope you enjoyed. Drop a comment for any suggestions on what I should record next week, and yeah, have a good one. Thank you.